Hello and welcome to the Kings of Anglia Ipswich Town Podcast. My name is Andy Warren, and on Monday late morning, joined by Stuart Watson and Ross Halls in the cold light of day, a couple of days on from one of the maddest games I think any of us have ever witnessed, lads. You're both on mute. Please come off mute, otherwise I'm going to be on my own here for an hour. Is anybody there?
I am, sorry. I just, as soon as you said let's go, I had a bit of a coughing fit there. So I'm with you. I'm good.
Good manners. Ross, are you here? Just before we crack on, just check you're here.
I'm here, my friend. Good old.
Great. Right, Ross is here. Let's crack on. Lads, that we all spoke. We recorded some videos. We chatted after the game on Saturday. Obviously, everybody will know by now. Ipswich Town drew 4-4 with Charlton in a wacky, crazy, dramatic, topsy-turvy roller coaster game that all went off in stoppage time, and we were struggling to collect our thoughts after the game. It was a pretty hectic time with a lot of emotion and everything running wild. But the best part of sort of 36 hours on from that, how are we feeling about Saturday?
I think we're that few more steps removed from it emotionally than those that were in the away end. Our mind is sort of professionally on the task as those goals in. We're more concerned about who provided the cross, who lost their man, who ultimately put it in the back of the net, what minute it is, frantically rewriting intros and live blogs and things like that. So we probably didn't live it emotionally in the same way those fans did. So I could understand it. Had I gone through those emotions in the away end, I'd have felt really raw and probably quite angry about it at the end of the game. So I understood that being the immediate reaction on Ross's game day video and social media and things like that. Although we were still trying to sort of process what had happened, I kind of deep down felt that it felt a bit freakish and that I would be able to kind of not park it and move on, but kind of not, it still doesn't massively concern me. And I know there'll be people shouting at this saying, the Port Vale game had happened a few days earlier and there's some patterns emerging and things like that. I still don't see it like that for me, having watched back that stoppage time, which we'll probably break down in a little bit more detail. I do think it's a little bit freakish, to be honest. Yes, there's some things that Ipswich could and should have done better within there, but we're a whisker away from, imagine the tone of this and the whole mood around the club if Ipswich had won that game in stoppage time, whether it had been 4-2, 4-3, everyone would have been singing from the rooftops, wouldn't they? So weirdly, I'm okay with it. I think it didn't take me too long for the emotions to settle down from my point of view. How are you boys feeling about it?
We'll roll on to the bigger picture stuff a little bit later on. But in the immediate aftermath, Ross, you were sat. We will break down those 9 minutes. But you were close to the away end. We weren't. We were in the home fans, which obviously got the other side of the emotions. We got the misery and everybody leaving as Ipswich went 4-2 up, followed by the joy of those that were left dragging back to 4-4. But you were essentially on the front row of the away end. That's basically where you were. What was that like?
Just mental, honestly. The scenes in our away end when them first two goals went in to make it 4-2, and just the switch of just the change when it did go 4-4, and I was very lucky. I was got front row seat of like the celebrations. Luke Wolfenden going on the hoardings, players just celebrating, like scoring in a cup final, because those were massive goals in that game. But yeah, it was a mixed emotions, but it was just something I don't think will ever repeat again. It's one game you can sort of say I'm pleased I was there, but also not because of what happened at the end. But yeah, unbelievable scenes.
Yeah, incredible to witness. Let's jump straight to stoppage time. We'll break all of that down. There's obviously plenty to talk about through the course of the 90 minutes, but the thing that this game will be remembered for is stoppage time itself. I'm going to start a timer on my phone and see how long it takes us to talk about 9 minutes of stoppage time, whether we can actually discuss all of it in 9 minutes. I'd be surprised if we're quite done with it in that time. But the time has started, Stu. It's 2-2 going into stoppage time. George Edmondson, Tyrese John-Jules had given Ipswich a 2-goal lead. It had gone. Raksaki and Albie Morgan with close range levellers. It's 90 minutes. Let's start analysing.
Yeah, well, I haven't got it down sort of blow by blow, but my first point I was going to make is I think the game finishes with 9 minutes 43 seconds of stoppage time played, roughly around that. They'd put up, the board had gone up for 6 minutes. So the first question from an Ipswich point of view is why all that extra time played on top? That is a minimum of 6 minutes. It's at the referee's discretion to add some extra time on. I think it's in the rule book now that it's 30 seconds for every goal and for every substitution. So there's obviously 4 goals in there and 1 sub because Keogh came on when one of the goals went in. So and then obviously the ball is dead for a certain amount of time during those 6 minutes as well. So for me, I haven't got any issues with the time going on to what it was. Is the first thing I wanted to say.
Yeah, I think with the Ipswich goal, Ipswich scored twice, and yes, 30 seconds is kind of the arbitrary time, but it actually took Ipswich 3 minutes it took 3 minutes for, if you add the 2 Ipswich goals together, it took 3 minutes for the game to kick off again. In terms of fishing players out of the away end. Didn't quite have the James Norwood trolling back, but nearly. Morsey was doing his best.
Yeah, I mean, you could make an argument that maybe Ipswich could have done a little bit more of that sort of time wasting. I think there wasn't too many moments in there. Walton had the ball in his hands at one stage and maybe could have hung on to it a little bit longer. There was a throw-in that Leif Davis took quite quickly. I think that's just so ingrained in the Ipswich players that you restart as quick as possible. It sort of goes against instinct for them to take their time over that. But we're nitpicking a little bit on things like that. As I say, 9 minutes, 43 seconds played. The ball was dead. Do you want to know how long the ball was actually not in play for during those 9 minutes, 43?
Yeah.
You do, don't you? 5 minutes, 51. The ball's not actually in play. Ipswich are in. So that leaves, how long have we got left there? Just over... Got about 4 minutes left there, haven't we? Where the ball's actually alive. Ipswich had it for 2.5 minutes of those, 2 minutes 33. So by my reckoning, Charlton had the ball for around 1 minute 19 seconds in the entirety of that stoppage time, and they've managed to score twice. I started to count how many touches of the ball Charlton actually had in that stoppage time. I think it's around 27, give or take. I might have missed 1 or 2 in terms of just different players touching the ball. Completed passes to each other, 16 Charlton in the entirety of that stoppage time. 2 of those are kickoffs going to another teammate, obviously. So that to me says that this was a bit freakish. Yes, Ipswich, ultimately it's going to boil down to Ipswich not defending long balls, high, deep long balls into the box, which is becoming a little bit of a theme when you include Port Vale in there as well. But in general, that you could play that, as McKenna said, with real clarity, actually, quite soon after the game. You could replay those 9-10 minutes 100 times again, and that wouldn't happen.
He was quite measured after the game, I thought, Kieran McKenna, wasn't it? I think from previous managers, we might have seen something a little bit more raw, Ross, particularly maybe thinking back to the last manager. I don't quite know how Paul Cook would have dealt with that, but you've got to remember we haven't really talked about Ipswich scoring twice in stoppage time as well, because to dig in and find first that Freddie Ladapo goal, which I think was a spectacular finish, the whip and the pace that he got on that ball to score was probably one of the best strikes of the season for me. The way he hit that ball and it flicked off the back of the net once it hit it. Beautiful. But yeah, Ross, talk me through your thoughts on this before we get into the goals that Ipswich conceded.
Yeah, the Dapo's goal is definitely the pick of the bunch. For him to score a goal like that, I don't expect that from him, actually. Not to discredit really Dapo, but I'm used to him scoring like a header or in the box, clinical finish. But for him to get the ball, hold up his man, and fire home that, of course, that a lot of people go that could have been an ideal winner. to make it 3-2, and we don't need to worry about scoring another goal, just hold it back. But to Sam Morsey to get the ball, and for him, a deflection, of course, make it 4-2. And I thought, here we go, job done. At that point, I was looking down at my pictures, pretty happy with my celebrations, everything. And, what came was what I don't think anyone was expecting. And, 2 goals. I'm sure McKenna and co probably will be analysing that for a while, because there were 2 goals that we shouldn't be conceding. But we'll get into that now if you want, mate.
Before we do, Stu, I think you made a really good point for once in your Sunday morning observations, and it's one that I must admit had gone through my mind. Would they have won this game if they hadn't scored the 4th?
It sounds really weird to say, doesn't it? But I actually think Morsey getting another goal in stoppage time went against them, because that's when I think everyone's heads went emotionally. They were such scenes, wasn't there? When I thought there was a deflection on that Morsey strike. I'm not convinced, actually, watching it back from other angles. I think it just goes through the defender's legs and in the bottom corner. And I think that's when the guard goes down. I think if it's 3-2, everybody is razor sharp focused on, right, we see this out now. And I'm not sure if what happens if that 4th goal doesn't go in, if I'm honest with you. But I mean, there's a few kind of sliding doors moments in this game before the 90 minutes was up, which we'll go back to in terms of things that changed the dynamic of the game. But yeah, weirdly, I think that 4th goal may have gone against them in a strange way.
Yeah, we'll never know. But I think you're probably right. When I read that, that did sort of consolidate something that I'd weirdly thought in my mind on Saturday, and then you think, actually, that's nonsense. You can't. It's not bad to score a goal, but I think you might be. Onto something. We've talked about this for 7 minutes, by the way. In 7 minutes in this game, there's already been 3 goals in the time that we've been talking about it. So we've got 2 minutes left till we get to 9. I think we might even have extended time beyond that.
I want to just skip to the Charlton goals. We're kind of 2 good goals. We've talked about Ladapo. We talked about Morsey. Let's skip to the heartbreak moments. I'll let you take it, because you've done a really nice piece online today, Andy, sort of breaking down stoppage time. So we'll take you to 90 plus 4 and Charlton pulling one back within seconds of the restart.
Well, within 15 seconds, the free kick that leads to it's been given away. That's Sam Morsey, the goal scorer in the middle of the Ipswich half. And this goal, I think, perfectly exhibits what we were just saying about maybe losing concentration, because there's a lot going on here.
Do you think it was a bit of a tired tackle from Sam Morsey in the first place?
Yeah, I do. There's kind of maybe you'd expect more kind of, how you see players kind of stand in front of free kicks to stop them being taken and things like that. That it was, everyone looked a bit kind of switched off, a bit tired. Dominic Ball's lost Blackett Taylor at the back post. That ball's come back into the box. By this point, Richard Keogh's come on. I'd like to talk about this in a minute as well, but Richard Keogh's come on and the ball's been turned back in. And by the time that I keep saying Terrell Taylor, that's an NFL player, Terrell Thomas, puts the ball in the net, Luke Wolfenden's given him a bit of a push and then lost his runner. That push has knocked George Edmondson onto the line. Then he's away. Walton, I wonder whether Walton could have done more at the near post. Ross has gone. Was gone at the near post to get that ball. And by the time Thomas puts it in, Stu, the 5 nearest players to Thomas putting that ball in the net are Ipswich players. He's in this little island in the middle of 5 Ipswich players. I think that's that goal more so.
Looking back at that one, you mentioned Keogh at the near post. I think he could just put that out for a corner at the near post. I think he consciously leaves it to think that Walton might be there to collect behind him. So a bit like that first goal, not quite on the same level. The first goal conceded at Port Vale. Yeah, lots of little mistakes adding up to one big one there, and then. Even at that stage, we're thinking, well, the 6 minutes are up, and you listen back to the Charlton commentary, and well, that's just going to be a consolation. And but it's not, is it, Andy?
No, we've got there's some things to talk about in between here as well, isn't there? There's one notable one which is Sam Morsey. Town, I think you mentioned earlier, Walton had the ball in hands for a few minutes. That took a few minutes, not a few minutes, 20 seconds. He took 20 seconds off the clock there. But they go long from that, and Ladapo knocks the ball down really nicely for Sam Morsey. And it's definitely with the benefit of hindsight, it's a moment you're thinking about going to the corner, isn't it? With hindsight.
Yeah, with hindsight. But again, this is where sort of emotions come into it. And when I talked about the fourth goal going against them, does Sam Morsey try and do that if he hasn't just scored from 20 plus yards out? Is he just feeling sort of supremely confident at this stage and has enjoyed the feeling of those celebrations and fancies it again? He's got Ladapo to his left. He could have turned to his left and taken it into the corner himself, but he tries to sort of find some room in a crowded penalty box, and that if you're looking for Town's biggest mistake in those entirety of those 9-10 minutes of stoppage time, that is the one from Sam Morsey. He's given the free kick away for the third, and a little bit of tunnel vision, a little bit of greed, with 97 plus I think at that stage to give the ball away. Charlton get the tackle in, and they go on to score from there.
Yeah, I think there are some more little things from here as well. I think Dominic Ball in the first 20 minutes of that game wouldn't have been beaten off the ball by Chukwuemeka quite as easily before he turns and kind of spreads play for Charlton there. That's maybe a bit of tiredness, because Dominic Ball's a very strong player. Chukwuemeka is a ridiculously strong.
Yeah, and Dominic Ball, to be fair, is still not anywhere near full match fitness. Hasn't played a lot of football this season. He's gone straight into the team on Tuesday night, which was probably took a little bit out of him. And so, yeah, maybe a bit of a tired Dominic Ball up against a fresh, physical Charlton substitute in Chukwuemeka, who had, earlier on, I think for Charlton's first goal, had outmuscled George Edmondson down the flank. So these aren't sort of weak Ipswich Town players we're talking about here, are we? No. Edmondson and Ball, but Anike he's a beast of a striker, and he was fresh, and he caused some problems, and so that was the first sort of thing that led to the Charlton fourth goal. I thought Marcus Harness was a little bit all at sea. When I look back at that one, he was kind of dragged out of position a little bit. Sam Morsey by that stage isn't hunting the ball in the same way that he was. He just sort of dropped into position. Harness got dragged out of position. And then again, it's just another deep ball to the back post.
This is kind of an area that Paul Lambert used to bemoan. That a big issue of the Lambert area was not stopping the original cross. I mean, it's not something that's quite as big an issue now for Ipswich as it was under Lambert. But if you stop the cross, Albie Morgan can't curl the ball really neatly into the back post, and then it's an isolation. It's an isolation moment, isn't it, guys? It's Dobson and Davis. Davis, obviously, as a defender, you're kind of backpedaling. The attacker has the benefit usually of being able to attack it front on. But
I don't think he's going for goal with that header, and I think he pretty much admitted that in his post-match press conference. I think he's just trying to get something on it, help it back across goal. I know people have talked about Walton shouldn't really be sort of lobbed by a header from that close range. I'm not pinning that one on Christian Walton. I think he's just tried to flick it back across goal, and it's just any other arc of the ball, and Ipswich deal with it. But it's just the way it fell.
It's taken Walton by surprise a little bit. I think if you watch back the footage, he just as of the moment of impact on Dobson's head, he comes off of his toes and onto his heels, and that is probably because he is expecting that ball to go back into danger rather than over his head. Whereas if he was expecting it to go over his head, which you're probably right, Stu, it's probably not where you're expecting the ball to be. It'd have been on his toes, and it's just that. And you see it so often. It's not an error. It's just once you're flat, your feet are flat and planted on the floor. You just haven't got that spring to be able to spring. That's just sort of biology. It's not biology, is it? One of them.
Let's go with it.
It's one of them. You haven't got the spring anymore.
Physiology.
Physiology. That's it. you would expect a doctor to know this stuff. It's harder. It's much harder to then get that spring and it's looped over and into the net. But that was a horrible moment, wasn't it? There weren't many Charlton fans left at this point. You look back at the footage, and there is an awful lot of red seats on display. Imagine being outside the ground and your team has come back and done that.
I've never understood people who leave games early. I know people say about avoiding the traffic and stuff like that, but this, for me, what happened here is a reminder of why football is the best game on earth, because no other sport can provide drama like that. It's a game of chaos, and it is, no matter what happens in the game, it only takes a second to score a goal. And I think there's other sports don't quite provide that same level of drama. Yes, it's gone against Ipswich Town here, but what entertainment, when you step back. I know it's hard to say that because we're looking at it from an Ipswich Town point of view, but that for me is why football's the greatest game.
Yeah, it's just the flow, isn't it? Had any away fans left at 4-2 up, Ross? Because if you're standing to get the train back to London Bridge, you might think that your team's just won 4-2, only to look at your phone and just be like, ah.
I have a feeling there'll be a lot of Town fans who are still probably in the middle celebrating that fourth goal when the third goal goes in, because you're still like, hugging your friends and everything, and then you look up and go, oh no. But I'm sure there's some. I'm with you, Stu. I would never leave a game. If we're losing 4-0, whatever, you would probably leave at that point because we're not going to get back into this. But when it's 4-2, still got minutes to play. Don't leave, because I think I saw a video of some Charlton fans actually outside the ground trying to get back in, but of course they couldn't get back in because they left. But I don't think I saw any Town fans leaving because I'm sure they were just still celebrating Morsey's fourth goal and everything. But just pandemonium. What's that word?
Pandemonium.
That's the word. I'm not going to say again.
What do you reckon the Ipswich Town analysts saw of this, Stu? Because we weren't on this occasion. They were on the other side of the ground on a gantry, but a lot of grounds, the analysts watched the game from a similar area of the press box, and they obviously need to be back in the dressing room pretty sharpish after the game. Most notably at half time, they kind of leave the gantry at just as stoppage time begins to get back down to deliver the information to Kieran McKenna and the team, and they do the same at full time to be there when the team come in and sort of begin the post-mortem. I'd like to know what they saw.
Yeah, it's interesting that, because I think they were up on a proper high gantry, sort of hung down from the underside of the roof on the opposite side to the dugout. So there's every chance they left before any of that late drama unfolded.
I've watched back some. I've watched back. By the way, we have now been talking directly about stoppage time for 18 minutes, which is twice as long as the actual stoppage time itself. This is the longest stoppage time chat in the history of chat. We're into stoppage time on top of stoppage time. But I've watched stoppage time in its entirety 3 times this morning. The last of which came via Charlton's Twitter page and had some other interesting angles of Mr. Ed Sheeran, his reaction to, I think it was the 4th goal going in. He was still there, and he could not. I think he was very shocked. Some kind of pained smiles. He was sat in the middle of the Charlton home end, of course, but some kind of like pained smiles, kind of like, what have I just seen? But also, I really don't like what I've just seen. That's worth a look.
Interpreted by some as why is he celebrating a Charlton goal?
Yeah.
That, to me, that was just utter disbelief at something that we've said. We've both covered football for more than a decade, haven't seen anything like it before, probably won't ever see anything like it since. So I think that was just a shock and disbelief smile. That one. I'm glad he was still there, because you would imagine Ed Sheeran. We talk about people getting away early. I think when he's been at home games, he tends to get away a bit early, which I can understand from his point of view. If you're going to get hassled a bit, aren't you? If you're Ed Sheeran, leaving when everyone else does. But I'm glad he was there to see all of that in its entirety.
Yeah, right. That's stoppage time. We've spoken about it for 19 minutes and 50 seconds. Before we move on, any more notes on stoppage time?
It just happened, didn't it? Freak result.
Let's move on because there's a lot more to talk about from this game. We've got a little bit of audio to play in a minute from Kieran McKenna and Ben Garner, just talking about some whistles from the crowd during the first half of that game, which is another thing I don't think any of us have really seen at a football game before, but all in all is probably being lost a little bit given what happened later in the game. But before we get to that, is there any burning desire to talk about anything else from this game before we crack on with that incident?
Well, there's the Ben Garner reaction to Ipswich's second goal going in, which I thought was a bit of again, changes the dynamic of this game. Ordinarily, if you're a away team and you score in first half stoppage time and then add a second within 7 minutes of the restart, that normally guarantees that you've completely killed the spirit of the home team and the home crowd. It didn't on this occasion because of the reaction of their manager, Ben Garner, who was red carded in the aftermath of that goal going in. Yellow card for the strength of his protest. They were because he felt that it wasn't a foul on Dominic Ball from George Dobson. He was booked for that. He didn't think it was even a foul. Kieran McKenna disagreed. And then he felt that the goal was subsequently scored. The cross that led to John Jules heading in was, John Jules was offside as well. So he protests. He gets a yellow card. He then sarcastically applauds the yellow card and gets another, and he's off. And he takes a long time, first of all, shouting in the face of the fourth official, but then really milks it, going all the way down the touchline towards the tunnel, which was kind of nearer the corner flag. Really whipped up that sort of home end for Charlton, didn't he? A wheeling of the arms, punching of the air, cupping of the ears, lingered at the mouth of the tunnel. And by the time that had all played out, a crowd that should have been quiet and demoralised were really fired up. We were in the thick of it in that press box on the front row of the top tier, and they were breathing fire by that point, weren't they? And I think that translated a little bit to their team.
The managers getting kind of whipped up like that looks all the more dramatic when they're wearing a hoodie, I think, as Ben Garner was. That's the new breed, the pep school of hoodies on the touchline. Just brings that extra bit of grit to it. I'm going to play this now, and then we can talk about the incident afterwards. But basically, as I'm sure everybody knows now, there were some whistles from the crowd in the first half, which during two Ipswich attacks, one of which Ben Garner feels that Charlton benefited from, and the other Ipswich. So we'll play what the two managers had to say, then we can have a chat about that in a minute.
Incidents in the game, whistles in the crowd in the first half. What did you make of that?
Yeah, obviously no one wants to see it. I'm sure Charlton weren't happy with it as a football club either. I thought Tyrese was running straight for on goal. That was the key one, was running straight through 1v1 with the goalkeeper. And the whistle blows and he hesitates and stops because he thinks it's a free kick. So nobody wants to see that. I'm sure they will look at it. No one wants to see whistles in the crowd. That was disappointing. Thankfully, there wasn't any instances in the second half.
There was twice, and I think the first one went in their favour because we stopped, and then they got across and got a corner. But the second one probably went in our favour because he was through on goal. So I've never known that before. On both occasions, I thought it was a referee. When we stopped on the first one, all of us stopped, and ended up getting across in a corner. And on the second one, I think it was John Jules was it who went through. It probably affected him, in all honesty. So I don't know where that was coming from. I'm glad it got sorted, and hopefully we never get that again.
What do we make of that? It's not something I've ever seen before, but it really, really did sound like a referee's whistle, didn't it?
It did. Could you hear it from the away end, Ross? As far away as that?
Yeah. I know. I was at the home end for the first half, so I heard it straight away. And I was like, "Why is John Jules stopping?" Because I didn't see the ref, blowing his whistle. I know some fans can whistle. They can. Some people are really good at whistling, and normally that's nearly the full-time whistle, isn't it? Because people are like whistling. Come on, ref, blow the whistle. But it's something you just don't expect at a football match. And it must be a grade 1 referee's whistle. Someone must have brought it in.
That wasn't a man-made whistle, was it? Noise. That was somebody has actually brought a whistle to the game to do that. We thought it was as well, didn't we? From where we were, I think everyone.
And it really did put John Jules off, didn't it? He was through. I think it was Morsey put him through one on one. And he just had that momentary kind of. He got a shot away, but not the shot he'd have wanted. End up missing the target. And would he have scored if that whistle hadn't happened? You'd like to think that he would have done. Again, we'll never know. But there was another
who will be pissed off by that as well is their centre half O'Connell, who ended up getting stretchered off. He made the sort of the goal saving tackle on Tyrese John Jules because of that moment of hesitation, and got injured in the process, and that was the end of his game.
Everything has consequences, doesn't it? But I think a momentary shout out to the Charlton Athletic PA man, who, while I would argue his PA volume was turned up far too loud for most of the afternoon, once kind of the referee and the managers had come together on the touchline to discuss this, I think some quite forceful words from the PA managed to stamp that out, didn't it? Just a simple stop it. That's what you want. Job done.
Yeah, no messing about with that one. They didn't faff around the edges, did they? And I think the home crowd sort of responded with applause as well. And thankfully that did nip it in the bud. Hopefully that was fairly well self-policed by the Charlton fans around him. I don't quite know whether someone managed to get it off of the whistle off of the offender or whatever the stewards got on it, but it didn't happen again, thankfully.
Yeah, referees became a proper topic of conversation after this game, particularly Ben Garner kind of suggesting that his team were playing against 12 men all afternoon. But all in all, probably Ipswich have had just as big a gripe with a one-off decision in the first half, at least, where Tyrese John Jules again had a shot deflected wide for a corner, which ultimately did lead to George Edmondson's goal. But that deflection, if you look at some still images, pretty clearly came off a hand, didn't it, guys? And Kieran McKenna post-match was talking about if that decision had been given, it would have been a penalty and a red card. But if it's me, I'm all right with the outcome of all of that. Ipswich have scored. Given Ipswich's recent record, give me a goal rather than a penalty, please.
Yeah, they scored from the subsequent corner, and we went, oh well, it doesn't matter now. But McKenna's take afterwards was that it would have been a red card and a penalty. I don't actually know I lose track of all the rule changes. I should be hot on this, but is that double jeopardy? Do you get a red and a penalty in that situation? Is it deemed? Does it have to be a deliberate act? I really don't know what the rule would have been there.
I think because it was a handball directly stopping the ball going in the goal, I think it would have been both.
Okay.
I don't think the double jeopardy thing would have been an issue there. I think it would have been both, but
yeah. So we'll never know, will we? It's another. We talk about all these sliding doors moments. Garner's reaction, Ipswich's fourth goal, whether that red card. I think Ipswich against 10 men, I would back Ipswich with the way they play and their possession football to take full advantage of that over the course of an entire half of football. As you say, a penalty doesn't equal a goal. Ipswich have not converted 2 of their previous 3. We just have to say we'll never know how that one had panned out, but they did ultimately score from the subsequent corner. Great delivery from Davis, great header from Edmondson, goal from a set piece Claxon. Don't know if we need to sound that anymore. We're starting to get a few of those this season. Another goal from a defender, second one Edmondson scored this season. So that was another area that Ipswich, for a long time, we'd said Ipswich needed to work on. So yeah, and a hammer blow. I think when you score seconds before half time, that's always a really good time to score.
Do you think we can start to leave a few of these things behind now? Maybe the goals from set pieces, Town beat Derby on TV previous weekend. Maybe it's time to leave a few of these things in the rearview mirror. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I was going to bring up we scored from a set piece, but yeah, we've scored a few recently, so I think we now can say, we don't need to, ring the klaxon on that anymore because it's happened, and winning one Sky against Derby, beating teams that are bigger in this division as well. So we are ticking those off, and we can say there's not many monkeys to get off our back now because we've done it all. But yeah, it was a nice header from Jordan Emerson. Just wanted to say because that was my favourite, one of the pick of the bunch. I know Ladapo's goal was good, but I just love a bullet header. I know Stu does that as well.
I don't. I don't like him.
You don't?
Of course, I like him.
I guess there's a new monkey. There's always another monkey, and the new monkey is now holding on to Leeds, which we'll probably come on to in a little while.
Just monkeys, Stu, just clawing through to get on the back. Just
like
there's
being
always
in
more.
Just monkeys everywhere trying to steal your lunch. No, there. I guess that is a takeaway from this, isn't it? Now that we were talking last year, joking about you wouldn't let Ipswich take your dog for a walk because they can't hold on to Leeds, and that's started to happen a few times this season again. But we'll come on to that in a bit.
I can't think of too many occasions where a 2-goal lead has been let go twice in the same game, let alone then obviously
3 times in the same week.
3 times in a week, but twice in the same game to do that is pretty mad. It's not very Ipswich Town. Like, let's go there. Let's go there now, Stu, because I think some of the fallout from this game is kind of aimed at the defence. Of course, and I think everything we've just said about the manner of these goals that were conceded isn't necessarily all pointing towards the defence either. It kind of, if you're talking about losing balls high up the pitch and not closing down crosses, that they're midfielders and attackers we're talking about there. So it's a team game defending, particularly for an Ipswich team that like to press from the front. But inevitably, when you concede 4 goals in a game, 6 in a week, twice in stoppage time, there's going to be an element of a spotlight goes on to the defence. So our columnist, North Standard Terry Hunt column this morning is led on in part about a need for change at the back. Where are we at with that? Because I'll be honest, it's not something that's top of my list of things that need to happen. But I will also admit I was a little surprised perhaps that Richard Keogh didn't start this game. I kind of had it in my mind that maybe he might after Tuesday night, given how things kind of switch and change at Ipswich. But
well, first thing we need to say is that Richard Keogh was on the field for Charlton goals number 3 and 4. So that needs to be mentioned.
Yeah, that's worth talking about, I think, Stu, because is that helpful? That just chucking on a defensive body is that helpful necessarily?
It's easy to look. They've conceded 2 goals, and then you can go, well, it's disrupted the team, and it goes against you. But there's been other occasions where Cameron Burgess has come on in the 90th minute and got his head on a couple of things, and you go, well, that's exactly why you've put him on. So I'm not going to kind of pick that to pieces. Managers do that all the time, bring on a player to run down the clock, and you go, that's great game management, etc., etc. So, I don't think there's huge amount to pick there. I mean, we've talked a lot about Charlton goals 3 and 4 in stoppage time. You mentioned they'd already given up a 2-goal lead in normal time. I mentioned earlier, Anike had outmuscled Edmondson down the side. I thought he should have done a lot better there. Then someone gets a run on Davis at the far post, and they get in a bit of a muddle. And then the second Charlton goal, we're talking about the defence a lot here, but Marcus Harness is guilty of trying to turn in a very tight spot in midfield when there was a pretty simple pass on to his right. I'd be putting a fair amount of blame at his door for that goal. And then Christian Walton, we talked about, was there question marks maybe against him for the 4th? There's certainly question marks against him for that second one, because he just pushes the ball just straight back into a dangerous area, doesn't he? So
yeah, that's more than question marks. I think. I think he would tell you that as well.
Yeah,
that's poor goalkeeping from an exceptional goalkeeper.
So we've broken down a lot of those goals there, and we've mentioned quite a few different names in there. Morsey giving a free kick away, Dominic Ball losing a runner, Marcus Harness turning into trouble, Christian Walton making an individual error. I just think it's far, far, far too simplistic to go, we've conceded a few goals, the defence is broken. You attack as a team, you defend as a team. You know, it was only just over a week ago that everyone was saying how good the Ipswich defence had done to limit Derby to very few chances at Portman Road. All the talk was about, we haven't got the strikers to score the goals. Suddenly, Freddie Ladapo scores 3 in a week, and now it's suddenly there seems to be a need to kind of pick everything to pieces a little bit. What is these changes in defence that you're talking about? I mean, I think they've played 44 games under McKenna now and kept clean sheets in half of them, 22 games. And I think Donacien and Wolfenden have been near ever presence throughout that. Edmondson has played most of them, bar that little injury absence at the back end of last season. Yes, Burgess was starting to hit some really good form before his injury. Keogh is an option, but I think it's really important not to have a huge overreaction to these last few days. I really do. Yeah,
I'm with you there, and I'm quite firm actually that Wolfenden and Edmondson would be what I would persist with. I think you have to give great credit to Cameron Burgess for the form that he was able to show, but I think now this Ipswich side is becoming much more of a flat 4. I think the 3 suited him. I think he's got a big part to play for sure. You mentioned earlier, Stu, bringing players off the bench is kind of almost like a late beacon to kind of seek out aerial balls. He's got that role to play, and but for me, I'd be sticking with Wolfenden and Edmondson. They're a partnership. They know each other's games, and they're the players with the upside, I think, for Ipswich, and they give the team more of what they need as a team, not purely as keeping the ball out of the net. This whole side functions as a unit, doesn't it? And I think they're quite important to that with balls at feet and what they're able to do with their mobility as well. Any other thoughts, lads?
I want to disagree to make it, this interesting, but I can't, because I agree completely what you guys are saying. Because I think, we wouldn't have had those clean sheets if it wasn't for that defence. In recent weeks, definitely the Derby game, they were heading every ball, defending, for everything, blood, sweat, and tears. So for 2 crazy games conceding goals, people are already going, oh no, we need to sort that defence out. And Walton is a top class goalkeeper at this level. I know he had that one bad save on the weekend, but all the other ones, not great defending, but we can't change it overnight. I'm sure they'll bounce back, in the next league game, and we'll be singing their praises again.
I mean, the stats show that Ipswich not only have conceded very few goals, but they actually, I think, in terms of lead the way in terms of chances chances conceded in games as well, because of the possession brand of football and having someone like Wolfenden. I think we said after the Port Vale game that you have to accept the rough with the smooth, and it's a balancing act. And okay, sometimes Wolfenden can lead to goals against, but how many goals does he help probably start as well? And that's the same with other players. If there was one player that I would say is in the least amount of form out of that defence, is probably Janoi Donacien at the moment. I know we've always talked about him being Mr. Consistent, Mr. 7 out of 10. I think he's just starting to dip below those 7 out of 10 performances of late. Not going overboard on anything, but maybe he's someone that's just the sheer volume of games that he's played over the last year has just caught up with him a little bit. You could argue then that you could put a Keogh in. I'm not sure if Burgess is ready to go starting games at the moment. He's only 30 odd days on from massive facial surgery. I know he came on the other night for a couple of minutes, but maybe Keogh there. But that changes the whole look of the team, because he's not a right back, Richard Keogh, and so it becomes less of a back 4, back to more of a back 3. I'm sure Ipswich would look tighter for it. But I don't know if they would threaten as much as well. And yes, Ipswich have conceded a few more goals than they have done last season, but they're scoring a hell of a lot more goals as well. So there has to be a bit of a trade-off there. And I think over the course of these 17 league games this season, the balance from last season to this has been addressed. And you have to accept that maybe on the odd occasion you're going to concede some more goals.
I think actually the next few days could be really quite helpful for people like Janoi that you've just mentioned there. There's the FA Cup game coming up at Bracknell, which you would imagine that Kane Vincent-Young would play. if that means maybe if Genoy could get a good couple of weeks without a game before Ipswich are back at it, and against Cheltenham at home, just maybe a bit of freshness, a bit of Mr. 7 out of 10 can return instead of Mr. 6.5. Mr. 6 out of 10 doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
The other point I would make is I think this was a reminder at the end of another 3-game week that Ipswich's squad, I think, was just looking that little bit more stretched. We talked about maybe some tired legs towards the end. Dominic Ball, Leif Davis, who puts in a hell of a shift every game, up and down, real physical athlete. Where Ipswich have missed the likes of Greg Lee, who would have come on for a tiring Davis around 60, 70 minutes and would have been that. He would have probably not been beaten at the back post for that header, would he, for the fourth goal? And Shawnee Aluko to come on and just calm things down, bit of experience, bit of composure. He's probably not going to give the ball away like Marcus Harness did, for example, that we mentioned earlier on in the game. So they're just missing some of those specialist players. Even Cameron Burgess, I know he's available technically now, but, a fully fit Burgess. They're just missing some of these specialist players that the 5 sub rule was really helping Ipswich earlier in the season. But though just having a few of those specialist players out has maybe gone against them in the last couple of games or so.
Right, let's draw a bit of a line under the game itself and move on to what it means, the bigger picture, and where Ipswich are at heading into that the break for cup action that we just briefly touched on there. 7 points in a week, victory at home to Derby, at Port Vale, and then 1 on the road, albeit in dramatic fashion. If that game had ended 2-2, yes, we'd have been talking about a lead lost, but I don't think it would quite have. We wouldn't have made it 46 minutes into this podcast. Still kind of dissecting it.
Before you continue, you talked about any other notes from the game. We haven't even mentioned 2 absolute sitters that Ipswich Town missed within that. Scored 4 goals. John Jules has had a header from 6 yards out, I think, straight after Charlton had pulled one back to 2-1. So talk about another sliding doors moment. Anywhere but where he put it, straight at the goalkeeper down low, Ipswich go 3-1 up, immediately restore their 2-goal lead. I think that absolutely crushes Charlton spirits at that point. And then 86 minutes on the clock, Carl Edwards' ball drops to him quite nicely on the penalty spot, and he gets a bit excited and slices it well off target. And if Ipswich make it 3-2, then maybe a different story there as well. So an incredible game of football. So much, we've just spent 45 minutes discussing it. It had everything. Sometimes you just have to go, okay, it's finished in a draw. That's just a game of football we'll never see like the likes of which, again, it's a draw at a Charlton side who had a pretty good home record and were just starting to come into a bit of form, putting aside their previous result aside. I think a draw is not the end of the world.
Yeah, and it all adds up to 7 points in a week. And yes, no top of the table after the game. Had they hung on, they'd have gone top. But to be second at this stage with the amount of points on the board that they've got is pretty good. I think they took until the middle of January to reach this points tally last season. So here we are on Halloween. Ipswich are ahead of schedule in so many ways, aren't they? Game by game, you can look at so many. This was another one that we've often discussed this over the last few months about improvement on games. Obviously, last visit to the Valley was horrific for Ipswich Town in the wake of Paul Cook's sacking. Ended in a miserable defeat, which ended with players and fans kind of at each other's throats. But it's a point. It's another game where they're up on last season and they're right in this, and there's no reason to believe they're not going to be firmly in that automatics hunt come April, May.
I think on your game day video, Ross, that point was kind of made by some, that the difference in mood after those 2 games at the Valley tells you everything about how far Ipswich have come. That was toxic on that Tuesday night with after that 2-0 defeat. Cook had just gone, Toto confronting the fans, someone shoving Christian Walton. Disappointing, frustrating, all of those things, but still a real sense of pride in this group and still a real sense of unity, I think. That certainly was far from being toxic, flat, frustrated, all of those things. But it was a world away from what we'd seen at the Valley, 10 months previous, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. You used the perfect word there, unity. I think some fans are still just in shell shock. I think that's probably why they didn't leave the ground. They're just more like what has just happened, but they also just still clapped the players off, and the players went over. I'm sure they were sort of somewhat embarrassed going over, like we were 4-2 up and we've conceded twice late on. But I think there was frustration at the end there. Like you just seen your team, for the second time in the game, lose 2-goal leads. But yeah, completely different, scale of what happened last year to what happened on Saturday. Of course, fans want to see your team win, but they were saying, freak result, once in a lifetime sort of result game, you'll never see again. Little shout out to Danny Haynes, appearing on game day as well. But yeah, I think even when the players who came on, they also got clapped as well. So they went on, did they do their running tests and stuff? Then they had to continue their loads, and fans were still cheering them on, which is would have been different last year because there was a lot of toxic atmosphere. But no, just one of those games we'll talk about for a long time because I don't think it will ever happen again.
It's kind of good that it hurts, I think, because it shows that people care again. There was a time before where there was just a sort of a numbness around the club when we'd reached sort of peak apathy and things were just sort of drifting and it was death by 1,000 cuts and all that sort of stuff that people just kind of shrugged it off. That's Ipswich. The fact that people are feeling so flat after this sort of result, after the Plymouth result, is because they care again. They're properly emotionally invested. There's a sense that something can happen this season. So it's a good kind of pain to feel. I'm starting to sound like Paul Cook there about feeling the pain and things, but sometimes you do, I don't think it will be a bad thing to learn these little lessons along the way. If one that hopefully won't be too costly, 2 points dropped. You don't want it to happen too regularly, but I think it also just keeps everybody's feet on the floor and knows that there's still a lot of hard work ahead. But this club's in a pretty good place, isn't it, as we sit here at the moment going into November?
It certainly is a month packed with cup football, which we'll talk about in great detail starting on Thursday. But before we finally draw a line under the Charlton game today, guys, any other addicts business that you want to discuss?
Well, as you say, this is a point gained on the Charlton game last season. I went back through it, and you can't do this completely faithfully because teams get promoted and relegated. But I was trying to work out how many results they've kind of bettered from equivalent from last season, and out of the 17 games, by my reckoning, only 2 of them have they not bettered, which was the home draw against Barnsley. And so I'm doing a bit of a straight swap for teams that have sort of come down from the Championship. So if you finish 23rd, you have to replace them with that. So I think that their equivalent would have been Sheffield Wednesday, I think, from the previous season. So, and Plymouth away, which was, a defeat both times. But every other game has been an improvement.
And none of them have gone backwards. No,
none have gone backwards.
2 have stayed the same.
Exactly. So if you want any sign of progress, that is it.
Yeah, it's a pretty solid sign, and a pretty solid 53 minutes of chat about a dramatic game, which I think everybody that either was there or watched it, or has watched it back since will remember for a very long time.
Have either of you got anything that kind of matches that in terms of drama that you've watched? I guess the Pablo Cunago winner against Coventry would sort of be up there in terms of late excitement.
Not quite in that way. Not all happening in stoppage time. I didn't see. I wasn't at that game, so I didn't witness that. I can't. There's obviously plenty of late winners, but this is a whole different level to just a late winner, isn't it?
Yeah,
not really.
I guess
not that I can think of.
It's the Norwich game in 2018 that probably, Chambers scoring and them getting one in 90+5 is is probably the closest in terms of the highs and the lows. So close at the end of a game to sort of matching this. I guess the stakes aren't as high, in terms of it being a derby and rivalry and things like that. But to score 4 goals away from home, I've seen that before. 4-4 at Derby when Ipswich were 4-0 up at half-time, 4-1 up at half-time. I can't remember. Certainly were well in front. And I think Steve McLaren had just been appointed watching from the stands and came down and had a little team talk at half-time. And I think Derby's equaliser came around 88, 89, something like that. So, but 4 goals in stoppage time. Madness.
Absolute madness. Move on to something else which might turn out to be absolute madness. I've got a feeling it might go down terribly, but let's see. I've had a little idea. It's Halloween today. I'll be honest, Halloween is not something I'm very good at. I've never done trick-or-treating in my life. I don't know how to do it. The one time that I considered trying it, I didn't have a costume, and I just put my bike helmet kind of, rather than on top of my head, I put it over my face, and I just looked like I was about to rob an off license. So decided not to knock on anybody's doors because that probably wasn't fair. But it is Halloween, and I thought we could chuck around some Ipswich Town Halloween names. Ipswich Town, to start you off. That's a good one. Before I open the floor to you guys who are bang up for this, I'm sure, I'm going to start. I've got a few. I've written down 5 or 6, and I'm going to chuck some of the best ones at you. And there's one specially for you, Ross, which I'll save to the end. Frankenstein Yallop, Spook Chambers, Sam Muhuhuhahahosi. Stu loves that one. Look at his little face. Richard Fright, and this one's for you, Stu. Pat Trick or Treat Kisnobo.
Nice.
Well done.
Thanks. Has anyone got any better ones than that? Because they're all terrible.
You've taken some themes. I had David Fright for David Wright. You've done that with Richard. Spookheim, again, same. Connor Wickerman. Does that work?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that works.
Quite pleased with that one. And I've also got David McGouldrick.
Oh, I like that one. Oh, Herman House of Horror Iderson.
That doesn't work.
It does. It definitely does. It's
doesn't.
really it's coming at you at a kind of a level above your level of thought, I think, mate. It's that good. Ross, I'm led to believe that you might have sought some outside help with this when I mentioned it to you before we started recording. What have you done?
I'm not very creative, so the KOA Posse chat, people from the Fan Social and Game Day. Good old Dan is the man with all the ideas. Shefty Spooky.
Yep, like that.
Luke Werewolferdon.
Oh yeah, that's good. That is good.
Yeah. Freddie Fears. That's all right. Christoph Terror. And then James Scarecroft. And also Bloomers has got one here. Gus Gulenbeek.
Yep, like that one as well. Vial Edwards. It's a bit harsh on Kyle, but
I've just been looking back through some old squads while you're talking. These ones are getting a bit darker on the Halloween theme. Jay Stab and Nigel Rio Choker.
Well, we know where your mind's at.
Ooh. And to end it, I think Kevin Boo. Boo. Yeah.
Yeah. Got it.
That's for Brad. Yeah.
Good old Brad.
Good. We've got a team there, probably.
I'm sure we could pull together an 11 out of that. Maybe we could do that for social media later on. If you're listening and you're in any way interested, maybe send us some. Ross, are you going trick or treating tonight? Is that? Are you allowed to do that at 26?
I think
you should.
To be fair, you could put a costume on. People don't know how old you are. Bring your voice a bit lower, and yeah. But no, I won't be doing that.
Go as like a zombie driving instructor.
Yeah, or just a car. Just dress as a car. If that's a thing. I don't know.
Jonathan Scar.
Yeah.
Jonathan Parr.
Jonathan Parr. Yeah, I like it. Brilliant. Right, we've reached the hour mark, which means I'm going to remember to tell you to look out for our sponsor, Manscaped, who offer all the grooming needs you'll ever need. You can get 20% off and free shipping using the code KOA at manscaped.com. Watch this space. They might be being joined in the sphere of sponsorship in the coming days. That's something exciting we've got to tell you about coming up. But before we say goodbye, I'm going to ask you two if there's any other business. Is there any other business?
No other business. I'm looking forward to Bracknell coming up next Monday, but we'll reconvene later in the week to discuss that.
We certainly will. Any other business, Ross? You're nodding.
I'm nodding, and I don't know. There's one more Halloween town player's name. I don't know if I should say it. It's a bit dark as well, like Stu's theme.
Oh, is it worse than the ones I've said?
Maybe.
Should we err on the side of caution?
Why don't you say it and then we can bleep it out if it's really that bad?
It is also another creative one from Dan. So, you know, Mick
Passing the buck.
Mick Kills.
That's okay.
That's okay. I was expecting a lot worse. I'll be honest. Maybe that can survive the bleep test. But thank you everyone for listening. And we'll see you again Thursday when we start looking ahead to a really intriguing FA Cup tie.